This morning, we are going to be looking at trading grief for joy. I'll tell you, there are two people when I was younger that were really important in my life. There was my Uncle Lauren, okay, and he lived next door. I remember I painted his house for him in order to get my very first car. That's how I got the first car, and painted his house. But he had dinner with us every single night. He was like a part of our family. The house I grew up in, he won in one single hand of poker. And then he sold it to my mom for some price, you know. But every day I would see him, and he lived right next door. And I'd go over to his house, and he'd come over. We'd have dinner together. He was like a part of our family. Another person that was a really, really important person to me was my grandfather. His name was Alvin. He was a Christian, and we really only went to church with him once or twice a year, Christmas and Easter. We would go to church, and he was a really, really special guy to me. As he got older, I remember one time when we were getting older, Grandpa, I was getting to the point where I could drive. And so Grandpa took me out driving, and I have great memories of Grandpa. We're driving along, I'm in the passenger seat, and he's driving. He comes up to the light, and he stops, and he says, "Now, Dusty," because everybody called me Dusty. "Hey, Dusty, now, you need to, whenever you come to a light like this, you need to stop," right? Because he's teaching me how to drive. And I said, "Grandpa, the light's green," right? I mean, but Grandpa, he worked for the church. He did a lot of work with the church. He worked at Caterpillar, but he worked with the church. He recorded audio cassettes for them, so they'd record all the sermons. And then he had equipment in his basement. His whole basement was filled with these machines. They'd put one cassette in, and it would fast forward record all the sermons. Like, he could do like 30 sermons at one time, just do this. It was incredible. But I remember it was 1990. And in 1990, it was a bad year. I had to go up to Mayo Clinic. We took Lauren, my Uncle Lauren, we took him up to Mayo Clinic because he was having some heart trouble. And one night we get up there, my mom and dad are in a hotel room. I'm in a room with Uncle Lauren, and we're just hanging out because he's going to have his surgery. It's going to be better the next day. He goes in the next morning, and he has this surgery. We drive home, my dad and I do. My mom stays up with Uncle Lauren to make sure everything's good. And we get home, and he's gone. He's gone. I was like, and I didn't really even, it was hard to even register, right? Exactly. It's the first time I'd really lost somebody that I really knew and that was really close to me. It was really hard. And then my grandpa goes up to Mayo Clinic. My grandpa passes away too. And I'm like, man, what is, and so I remember Christmas time that year. My mom had a record. Now, for those of you who are a little younger, a record is a piece of vinyl, and it's in a circle like this, all right? And we had a record, and the record was, it was Dolly Parton and Kenny Rogers, right? And it was their Christmas album, and there's a song on there, and the song is "Christmas Without You." And this song comes out. I'll never forget it. This song comes, and I just saw my mom weep and cry because there was this hole that was in her. She had loved my Uncle Lauren and loved my grandpa so much. There's this big gaping hole there. And the thing about Christmas is that Christmas just, when we lose people, it comes back because a lot of our really cool memories, we're very specific about trying to create memories at Christmas, right? We're trying to create all kinds of traditions with Cooper. And then there's history with him and his grandma and stuff that's happening at Christmas. And when she got this gift, and we remember all that. And so Christmas can be filled with grief, actually. It can be a harder time than a joyful time. And I know that from my own experience and from my own family. And so this morning we're talking about this candle here, which is a candle of joy. You're like, how am I going to have joy at Christmas time? Because every time Christmas comes, all I do is I think about what I don't have, what I'm missing. And some people feel that way at Christmas time. And so this morning I want us to just talk about that just a little bit. If you have felt grief, if you've lost somebody, you'll notice that there are kind of some stages that you go through. There was a gal back in 1969. She wrote this book called Death and Dying. Her name was Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, and she was a psychiatrist. And she talked about these 5 stages of grief, okay? And the first one is called denial. And basically it's this refusal to accept that it's happened, right? We're like, hey, maybe I'm going to wake up tomorrow and this won't be my reality, okay? Maybe I'm going to wake up and this won't be real. You're like, geez, But then you wake up the next day and it's still there. You wake up the next day and it's still there. And so eventually you get past this denial of saying it's not there. And a lot of times we just get angry. We just get mad, right? We're like, I'm so frustrated. I'm so angry that this happened. Sometimes I'm angry at myself. Maybe you're angry at somebody else. Maybe another member in the family. Somebody, you got to be angry with somebody. You've got to lash out at. Because all this emotion is there and it's going to come out somehow. And so it comes out oftentimes in anger, and you're angry. Sometimes you're angry. Sometimes the anger is at God. God, how could you let this happen? How could you allow this person to die? Well, everybody dies. But how could you let this happen to me? And so you go from just this idea of denial to anger to then sometimes they call it bargaining is the one she does, where you're just trying to make a deal. Well, and we see this a lot in relationships. I see this a lot in people that lost a relationship, an important relationship, because sometimes a divorce can be that way. It can be like a loss. It's a struggle, and we'll see even like relationships with people who are dating, they'll bargain. So you'll see a lot of dating relationships where when they leave, they'll say, "Well, can we still be friends? Let's still be friends, right? Because we're bargaining, we're trying to work something out in order to maintain something, and we're working out a way to deal and a way to cope." And then finally, we oftentimes go into depression. I don't know how many of you have dealt with depression, but I know I've dealt with depression. And I know many of you probably have dealt with depression, and it's hard, and it's bleak, and it looks difficult, and routine tasks become hard to do, and you have trouble getting up in the morning, and the situation just gets worse and worse until finally the last stage that this psychiatrist gives us is what she calls acceptance, where we're like, you know what? I have to move on. I have to move on with my life. I can't live in the past. This is the actual reality, and I can be okay. I can be okay in this. Okay? And what the world tells us, what the church doesn't tell you this, but what the world tells you is that you need to avoid and get past hard things like loss, hard things like grief. You need to get through that and get past it as soon as possible at any cost necessary, because it's weak, it's not good. You need to just get past it. Just put it away. And what the Bible encourages, what God encourages us, is that there is good that comes from grief. God uses grief for His own glory, and He does good things through grief. Even though it's hard for us, He uses it for good. So if you look at Ecclesiastes 7:4, I'll throw it on the screen. It says, "The heart of the wise is in the house of mourning, but the heart of fools is in the house of pleasure." Saying that grief actually brings us wisdom. When we go through grief, wisdom comes out of that. Also that God is near. If you look at Psalm 46:1, it says, "God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble." So when we're grieving, when we're going through the loss of something, God's there with us. He walks through it. It says in Psalm 147, He heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds. And it takes time. It's not like we have this loss and then all of a sudden a day goes by and all of a sudden we're fine. There's a process in this, right? But it comes. It comes. And also that we can find comfort in our grief. Comfort does come. That's the hope of this. It says in 2 Corinthians 1:3-4, it says, "Praise be to the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of compassion and the God of all comfort, who comforts us in all troubles, so that we can comfort those in any trouble with the comfort we ourselves receive from God." And so we find that the people that are the best at comforting people in grief are people that know how to just sit there and say, "I know what it's like to lose. I know what it's like to lose somebody. I know what it's like to have loss. I know what it's like to feel this pain. And let me sit with you. Let me listen with you. I'll just listen. Or I'll just sit. But I'm here. You're not alone." And here's what I think. I think today that Jesus wants to come into your life of grief, because some of us have grief. There's several of us I know in this room who've lost people this year, and it's been hard. And now you're coming to Christmas and you're remembering these things, and I just want you to know that we can trade that grief for joy, we can get through this, that there is joy in the midst of grief. And that there's use for that God uses it and does good things. If you've got your Bible, we're going to look at a passage here in Matthew chapter 14. You can turn to it. We'll go right at the beginning, and it's the passage that Jim read just a second ago. I want to walk through this a little bit and make some sense of this, because when I look and say, how am I going to handle a certain situation? How am I going to handle this difficult situation I'm in? How do I do that? Oftentimes what I do is I say, well, how did Jesus handle it? Or how would Jesus handle it? Jesus is always the example for how I want to live. And so in this passage, we have a situation where all of a sudden Jesus loses one of his best friends and a relative. And we see how this works out. Look, it says in verse 1, it says, at that time, Herod the Tetrarch heard the reports about Jesus, and he said to his attendants, this is John the Baptist. He has risen from the dead. That is why miraculous powers are at work in him. So John the Baptist is doing all kinds of crazy, miraculous kinds of things, or at least that's the word on the street about John the Baptist, that he's doing some kind of miracles. And the head honcho of the whole area, right, Herod, he's a nasty guy, and he's trying to squash this, but he doesn't want John the Baptist's ministry going out. One of the reasons that he's not excited about John the Baptist's ministry is that Herod's not a good guy as far as his marriage is concerned. Herod had a brother, okay, and his brother had a wife. And so Herod's brother's wife divorced her husband to be with Herod. And John the Baptist is saying, hey, you can't do that. You can't do that. That's not right. That's against the law. You can't. He's very vocal about this. And the only reason why he hasn't gone out and killed John the Baptist by now is because the people in town, they all think John the Baptist is great. They think he's a prophet. And if he kills a prophet, there's going to be a riot. There'll be some kind of revolt. So he's afraid of the people. He's not going to do anything. And so it says, this is John the Baptist. He has risen from the dead. They think that the reason why he's able to do all these miraculous things, John the Baptist, is because he must be like a ghost, right? He's died and he's risen from the dead, and now he can do all these things. In verse 3, it says, now Herod had arrested John and bound him and put him in prison because of Herodias, his brother Philip's wife. For John had been saying to him, it is not lawful for you to have her. Herod wanted to kill John, but he was afraid of the people because they considered John a prophet. That's what we just said. Verse 6, on Herod's birthday, the daughter of Herodias danced for the guests and pleased Herod so much that he promised with an oath to give her whatever she asked. Okay, so Herod's having a birthday party, okay? And he's a very powerful guy. So he's got all the people that are kind of under him, you know, like if he's the governor, he's got all the mayors and all the county reps and all that. They've all come there, but he needs to show them that he has authority and that he has power. But the party he's doing is there's a lot of alcohol, I'm sure, at this party. They're having a great time, drinking a lot. They've got some women that are coming and dancing, right? And that's a little bit risque, and so there's a lot shaking here. And in the midst of that, he's trying to show off to all these people and show them how much power he's got. And so he makes a promise that's kind of an ultimate promise. I'll give you whatever you want. Like, I have the power. That's what he's claiming. I have the power to give you anything you desire. Isn't that like the question like God or a genie? I don't know. One of the two is going to give you that. And so it says, on Herod's birthday, the daughter of Herodias danced for the guests and pleased Herod so much that he promised with an oath to give her whatever she asked. Now, this gal's mom doesn't like John the Baptist because John the Baptist is saying all kinds of nasty stuff about her because she has left her husband to be with Herod. And so she hates John the Baptist. She's like, you know what I want? I want John the Baptist's head on a platter. How about that? That would be fun. Yeah, go in there, chop his head off, bring it on a platter, and we'll have instead of a cake, let's do this. Right? So on Herod's birthday, they did a prompted by her mother. She said, give me here on a platter the head of John the Baptist. The king was distressed, but because of his oath and his dinner guests, he ordered that her request be granted and had John beheaded in the prison. So he doesn't really want to do that. You know, he's holding the guy in there just to kind of keep him quiet. But he's not wanting to kill him because he's afraid that there'll be some kind of revolt. But now he's made a dumb promise that he's got to fulfill, and so he fulfills it, and now he's in a real bind. The king was distressed, but because of the oath and his dinner guests, he ordered that her request be granted and had John beheaded in the prison. His head was brought in on a platter and given to the girl, who carried it to her mother. That's a pretty sick family. Sounds like some kind of horror movie. John's disciples came and took his body and buried it. Then they went and told Jesus. Okay, this is where things get a little bit crazy, because Jesus and John the Baptist are close. You'll remember that Jesus and John the Baptist, their relationship goes back to before they were actually born. Okay, we read in the Christmas story that when Elizabeth and Mary get together, they're both pregnant. Elizabeth has John the Baptist, and Jesus is in the belly of Mary. That they get close together, and John the Baptist starts leaping in the belly. All of a sudden, he's praising God in the belly. He's so excited. I mean, there's a close relate. When you're jumping for joy in the belly, you have a good relationship with somebody, right? It's powerful. And nobody understands what Jesus has gone through like John the Baptist. Nobody does. I mean, John the Baptist knows what it's like to be mocked. He knows what it's like to be ridiculed, to be persecuted. He knows what it's like for people in power to dislike him and to hate him. He knows what it's like to say things and have religious leaders be against him. He understands it. Nobody understands him like John the Baptist. This is the one guy that really gets it. And now he's dead. And the disciples go and they tell Jesus and say, "We got bad news for you, Jesus. Your best friend and your cousin, Herod killed him. And not only did he kill him, this is how he killed him." So, how's Jesus going to deal with this? You think Jesus had grief? Man, Jesus is 100% human. 100% God, but 100% human. He feels these emotions. He feels this pain. And he does what I think a lot of us would want to do. It says, when Jesus heard this, verse 13, what had happened, he withdrew by boat privately to a solitary place. He says, you know what? Enough with the funeral, enough with the crying. I just need to get by myself and process this. And I just need to get by myself and deal with this on my own. I need to go and be with God, and I need to talk to God about it and just explain to him why it hurts so much and this emptiness that I feel. I need to do that. And so I'm going to go off and be by myself. You think that's fair? I think that's fair. When there's people that I know that have just lost somebody that they love, I offer, I'm here for you if you need me, but I'm not going to push myself on. You take the time you need. If you need to be by yourself, you take that, because you've got to work through this grief on your own, right? But I'm here to help you with whatever you need, okay? I'm here to help you with the funeral. I'm here to help you with just sitting. I'm here to help with whatever. And so he's going to deal with this. But here's the problem. Look at verse. It says, hearing of this, the crowd followed him on foot from the towns. When Jesus landed and saw the large crowd, he had compassion on them and healed the sick. So all he wants to do after losing his best friend, after losing his cousin, all he wants to do is get away and be by himself. He hops in a boat and goes. And when he goes, the problem is that John the Baptist is somebody that everybody loves. All these people love John the Baptist. John the Baptist was an important guy. He was a prophet. And so they're distressed also. And Jesus, he just wants to get away. He just wants to get away and process this. And there's no rest for the weary, right? There's no rest. There's no time. Ministry still calls. Even in the midst of his suffering, he still has to continue to minister because they're there. And so it says he looks at the crowd and he has compassion on them. He has compassion. When Jesus landed and saw the large crowd, he had compassion on them and healed their sick. They got their own needs. They got their own problems. And that's the way it is. When somebody passes away and you're going through your grief, other people are dealing with their own stuff too. We're all kind of dealing with stuff. And these people are dealing with stuff. As evening approached, the disciples came to him and said, "This is a remote place, and it's already getting late. Send the crowds away so they can go to the villages and buy themselves some food." But Jesus replied, "They do not need to go away. You give them something to eat." We have here "Only 5 loaves of bread and 2 fishes," they answered. "Bring them to me." And so here, this makes a lot of sense to me. This makes a lot of sense to me. You've got Jesus who is really struggling with this loss that he had. The reason why grief is so bad is you've got something, you feel full because this person or this thing is in your life, right? You feel full. You feel like everything is okay with this person here. But as soon as that person's gone, you feel empty. You feel lacking. You feel like there's not enough. I no longer have enough. I had enough when this person was here, and now I don't. And that's why it's so hard. I don't have enough. There's this lack of. And the first thing that we see in this story is they're lacking food. The crowd is there, and they are lacking. What are they lacking? There's no food. There's nothing to eat. We are without. There's not enough. There's not enough. And it's the same picture of grief. There's not enough anymore because I've lost. And we don't have enough food anymore. And so Jesus does something incredible. I love this. Watch what he says. Jesus replied, told him, don't send them away. Give them something to eat. But we only have 5 loaves of bread and 2 fishes. We don't have enough. What we have is insufficient. And he directed the people to sit down on the grass, taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, and looking up to heaven, he gave thanks and broke the bread. Jesus says, listen, I know I am dealing with loss. I am dealing with not enough. I can't do this on my own. I don't have what it takes to get through this. So God, I'm calling to you. This is all I've got. This is all I have left. I've got a few fish. I got a few pieces of bread. But it's not enough. But the only way I can get through this, God, is if you make enough. If you take the crumbs that I've got and you make it enough, and that will make up for my loss or make up for what I don't have. Bring them to me. And he directed the people to sit down on the grass. Taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fishes, he looked up to heaven and gave thanks and broke them. Then he gave them to the disciples, and the disciples gave them to the people. They all ate and were satisfied, and the disciples picked up 12 baskets full of broken pieces that were left over. So there's leftovers. Everybody gets a doggy bag. The number of those who ate was about 5,000 men, besides women and children. Reminds me kind of a funeral meal, right? You get together, all this crowd, they've all lost somebody that they love, John the Baptist, they all get together. Jesus is the one who loves them the most, for sure. And they all gather together, and now they're going to have a meal together. And Jesus is teaching us something. Listen, I know that there's loss. I know that you're missing something. I know there's grief. But from grief, if you turn to God and you surrender that to God and you call on God like I'm doing right now, in our loss, in our lack of, God will provide abundance. And that's what God does. And so here are 4 things I just want us to take with us about grief. Taking our grief and turning it into joy. Giving it to God. God, here's my grief. God, give me joy. These are examples that I see from Jesus on how he deals with it. First thing he does is he decides, I'm going to get into solitude with God. I'm going to go to God in solitude. And I'm going to talk to God about the loss I have. Now, when I was a kid, I wasn't, with the loss I had, I never did that. I didn't know what to do. But it's important that we take our loss to God and say, God, I am empty. I am missing something here. I don't know how this void is going to be filled in my life. So God, I pray that you'd fill it. God, fill it with something good. I'm coming to you in solitude. The second is that we mourn with others who love you and share your grief. Jesus has just lost John the Baptist, and yes, he goes into solitude, he tries to, but he can't do that right now. He's going to go and do that. He's going to do that later. But he can't right now. So what does he do? He spends time with people that share his grief. And they spend some time together and they talk. And Jesus talks. And he preaches. And they listen. And there's conversations about this person, because that brings healing. It does, it brings healing. So they mourn with others who love and share your grief. The third one is be empowered to serve. Even though he's lost, even though he's had a great loss, he's lost this person, he's grieving, there's all this pain, he doesn't stop serving. He doesn't say, well, hey, my ministry's done now. I'm just gonna back off. I can't deal with this anymore. Jesus looks and he sees the need and he says, you know what? Life does go on, and I still am Jesus, and I still am a person that people care about and that people love and that people want ministry from. People still want healing. They want this. And yes, I'm going to grieve, but in my grieving, I'm going to continue to serve. I'm going to continue to minister. And so he continues and he heals people and he touches people and he continues to preach. He doesn't isolate himself. He doesn't go into a place where nobody can talk to him for long periods of time or anything like that. He's very active and says, I'm going to continue to minister. And sometimes we find that people will, instead of going out and continuing to live and continue to minister and continue to be with people, that they'll just isolate themselves back into a hole and they'll get into deeper and deeper and deeper despair. That's not what Jesus does. Jesus continues to minister throughout his grief. And the last one is receive God's abundance. Receive God's abundance. He traded his loss, right? We trade our loss and our grief for the abundance God has for us, right? We say, God, you are enough. Yes, I have lost somebody that I care deeply about, and I feel the emptiness, and it feels like there's not enough, and so I'm going to fill myself with the knowledge and fill myself with Jesus, knowing that Jesus, with you, I do have enough. All of you is more than enough for all of me. And so if that's you this morning and you've struggled with loss, you lost somebody this year, maybe you lost somebody 10 years ago. I know my mom every year, it's the same thing. It's been 1990 is when we lost my grandpa and my Uncle Lauren. And it's still hard. It's still hard. But there is enough in Jesus. There is enough in Christ. All of Jesus is more than enough. Let's pray, and then we're just gonna sing a song together real quick, and then before we close and pray that. Jesus, God, we thank you. There's many of us in this room who have been dealing with grief. God, we lost brothers, we lost sisters, we lost parents, we lost dear friends. And so we've been filled with grief, and we don't know how to get that grief to be joy. God, your word says that our grief can be joy. We can have joy even though we've experienced loss. And we see that you provide all kinds of provision for us. Even when they didn't have enough bread, they didn't have enough fish, God, immediately you're providing for our loss, providing for our lack of. So God, I pray that you'd fill us with your Spirit. God, that you would help us to make decisions to, first of all, go to you in solitude. God, that we would mourn with others who have gone through the same thing, or those who are mourning with us at the same time. God, that you would empower us, that in the midst of it, to serve other people. God, to continue our ministry, even in the midst of our grief. God, and that we would be open to receiving the abundance that you have for us. God, we love you, and we thank you for all this in Jesus' name. Amen.